Hiya, I hope everyone's safe and well. So this video is interviews with myself, some special guests and the cast to give you an insight on both the making of and the reaction to our virtual reading of The Importance of Being Earnest. Do you think The Importance of Being Earnest is relevant today? So I believe The Importance of Being Earnest is relevant today. As I said in my introduction to Act 1, we all wear different masks of, who we are. You wear a mask to say, I'm not going to swear in front of Granny, or I'm not going to, lots of different things. I can't think of anything off the top of my head at the moment. But also, while we're in lockdown and we can't go anywhere, I've said this before, Earnest is about kind of who you are, where you are. Well, it's got kind of themes along those lines, and who you are based on who you're with. And we can't go anywhere, we can't change the people we're with, we're kind of stuck with people at the moment. So that's kind of why I chose to create this project with this play.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think all of Oscar Wilde's work is actually, because so much of it is to do with identity and trying to find a way to exist as your truest self possible, even in the most kind of artificial of circumstances. And I also think the important thing about The Importance of Being Earnest is the wit. I think with Oscar Wilde, what you have to think about is the way that he's able to use language and wit to entertain, but also to make really important social points, comes from a place of him having to have developed those skills. One can only imagine the kind of difficulties that he faced growing up being a gay man in that world, and the coping mechanisms that he had to build. So I think The Importance of Being Earnest is hugely relevant. And I think probably even more so now that we're all under lockdown, that the kind of lightness coming out of darkness is really, really important.
Yeah, of course. I think you can make any play relevant to anything pretty much these days. Ernest definitely is, and maybe not for the way that most people would think, but because I think a lot of people do have alter egos when they move cities, if that makes sense, because maybe I'm only speaking on behalf of me. I'm not saying that I have one, or maybe I do, but I think everybody sort of has different faces around other people. So you have the face that you put on when you speak to your parents, you have the face that you put on when you see your childhood best friend, you have a persona that you put on when you're with your friends that that you've most recently been with, or like your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. So I think that's definitely something that people do, and obviously that's a key theme in Ernest, with the whole my name is Ernest, but it's not really, haha. So yeah, I think so.
So I've been trying to decide what I think about this for the past few days, and I think it definitely is still relevant today. I think we wouldn't have had the enjoyment we all had creating it if it wasn't relevant today. And I think you can tell from the certainly the bloopers reel and just from the performances that we did all enjoy creating this piece. So I think from that, it definitely feels like it is relevant. There is something in there that we can all still connect with and find joy within. But I'm not really sure I can put if I can put into words why I feel that way and why I think it's still relevant. Because obviously there are so many issues raised in it that I guess kind of are still relevant, but they're not the same, if that makes sense.
How did you feel having to act in isolation?
For me personally, I felt both free and restricted at the same time. I felt restricted in the sense that there were no co-stars in the room with me. I couldn't read off of anyone's reactions, so it was really hard to sort of comprehend how I was supposed to perform my lines. I always had a bit of like self-doubt about whether I was getting the lines right, because obviously I couldn't read the room because all of my co-stars and everyone who I was supposed to be performing with, they're in isolation. Like, we're all in isolation separately across the country. But I felt free because I was also free from having to react off of my co-stars. Like, if I felt like one of my lines wasn't supposed to be read that way, or if it wasn't supposed to be said in a certain tone or pace, I could redo it in the way that I feel was appropriate for the performance.
I can see it from both sides. Acting in isolation is quite tricky because you don't have anybody to go off or to bounce off, etc. So you have to rely solely on your craft, and you have to kind of, well, for me anyway, I had to kind of predict how other people might react to the scene in order for my delivery of my lines to work. So I found it quite restrictive in the sense of I've got no idea what the other person is going to do, so I'm just gonna, give you an offer and hope that it fits as to what's going on, which luckily I think it was quite successful for the most part. However, I did feel a sense of freedom because I could take the line wherever I wanted to, and it kind of opened up options as well as closed them at the same time. So you go down whatever route you wanted. You could be as over the top or as minimalistic as you wanted, and you could play around with that. And the reactions to be on stage would be, I think, different because when you're acting alongside somebody physically, you can physically see what and how they're reacting to their lines, so you don't have to guess. You can just, adjust and adapt while you're on that stage and experiment and play. Whereas obviously the playfulness kind of stops when you're just acting on your own because you've got nothing to play off of other than yourself, which is a good challenge. However, I do prefer acting in person.
So I found having to act in isolation really difficult. I think knowing the people I was working with but not really with, and knowing how generous they are as actors to work off, I felt like I wasn't providing enough for myself to do, and I know that if they had been there with me, they would have given me so much. They're so generous, and they would have given me so much to work off, and they'd play the events and everything so beautifully that it would be almost impossible not to react and not to be fully in it and creating behaviour. It definitely made me question what I was doing a lot more. And I think you can tell that because some things I took so many takes, because although I know the people I was working with, like Chelsea and that, you second guess what they would do, and you second guess how you think they would have played something, which is really weird. I think there are some beautiful moments in it where you can tell that we've all worked together, and you can tell that we know each other really well because our reaction, is that what you said? Yeah. Our reactions are all do work and do fit, and therefore probably would be kind of similar to how they would be on stage. Obviously it'll never be truly how it would be on stage because it's not live and we're not actually in the same room. But yeah, I mean, there's some moments where I personally just don't think it worked. You can tell that we were not playing the same event, I guess, even though you kind of are, but you're not really. And that's, kind of inevitable when you're not in the same room as each other.
I found it quite hard to act just to a camera, because it's the first time I've done it. I'm used to having somebody else to play off of, whereas I had to sort of invent that in my own head, which was quite good, I think, sort of like, as you know, a practice for the future for self-tapes and things like that. I think it was a new challenge, which I enjoyed.
Do you think this is an appropriate substitute for live theatre in these times?
Absolutely. I think, you know, as actors, nowadays we've been given a platform such as YouTube, such as social media, where we can share entertainment. And I think this is an appropriate substitute for theatre because it allows people to have access to free theatre. So there's, you know, obviously it's not the same as going to an actual theatre and watching a show in the West End, but it's still got that essence of performance and entertainment that people might not necessarily have access to now. So I think it's an excellent idea. It's really important in current times to keep theatre alive and know that, you know, it's not completely forgotten about, even though our theatres are currently shut. But yeah, I think it's great because, say for example, if we would have done the show on stage for real at the university or wherever, we'd probably get about between 80 people, 80 and 90 people maybe, like in those seats. But already Act 1, I haven't checked Act 2, but Act 1 has got like 140 views or something like that. So it's making it more accessible in a way, which obviously is always a plus.
No, not really. But I don't think there is is that what you said, suitable? Appropriate. I don't think there is an appropriate substitute. For me, there is no substitute to live theatre. That you cannot, like, I think it's impossible to fully grasp and embody everything that live theatre is and creates and gives to a person without it actually being live. And I guess that doing live performances over things like Zoom or live streaming stuff could sort of have those moments. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's really hard to say. Really hard to say. Because I don't think there is an appropriate substitute. So I don't think this isn't an appropriate substitute, but it's not.
Well, actually, I'd correct that. I'd say you absolutely did make live theatre. The most vital thing is that we as artists and practitioners have to remember is that art has to find a way. Of course, under these circumstances, there are days when the motivation doesn't come, and some of that is to do with the things that stimulate us. A lot of those things are not available at the moment. So social gatherings and the cinema or the theatre or dance classes or whatever it is that you find stimulating, they're not available at the moment. So sometimes not having the motivation is perfectly reasonable under these circumstances. But there are times when you do have the motivation, and like I was saying before about Oscar Wilde, that allowing seeds to germinate and green shoots to come through in times that feel very dark or oppressive or claustrophobic is fantastic. So this absolutely is live theatre. It's done as a live rehearsed reading. It just happens to be using technology. Now, would I rather have seen the production in a real room with all of you actually interacting with each other and seeing the reactions that you were giving to each other in response to each other? Of course I would. But that doesn't mean there isn't an awful lot to be excited about and to learn from what you did with this.
Yeah, so I think that this is definitely a wonderful, wonderful means of getting plays out there with, you know, fresh young talent, different people to do things like this while the theatres are shut. I, for one, am really happy that you did this and that everybody participated in it. I hope there's more. And something else I was going to say as well is like Drama Online, for example, has a lot of resources now because of the National Theatres Archive, which, because we're part of a drama school, we can watch that. But for a lot of people, they don't have access to that. So I think it's great that for the wider community, you've done this for free. It's really cool that you've given people a means of watching or listening to The Importance of Being Earnest, a classic wild play. Yeah, great. Wonderful.
This is one of the best ways to keep theatre alive whilst our country's dealing with COVID-19, because it's an opportunity to still see actors play and see actors bounce off each other without obviously putting health at risk. And if it's done right and if it's done well, it works really well, I think. It's a really good opportunity to sort of see what theatre can do, because we've got lots of opportunity. I think what was interesting about this is doing this, there's like a chance to screw up because this is being filmed, like I'm filming myself right now. You can't do that in theatre because it's all live, so whenever we screwed up, we'd stop filming and then we'd start again, or we'd go over the line and then Matt would like chop that out. Which sort of it makes theatre less live, but it's quite interesting in how that's done. So obviously Matt then released the blooper reel, which shows us screwing up and stuff, and sort of defeats the illusion of theatre, if that makes sense.
Well, I want to say yes. Of course I do. And I think this is a really interesting and new way that we can get theatre to the masses. You know, there's a lot more people have and will watch this version of The Importance of Being Earnest than if we'd done an in-house university production of The Importance of Being Earnest. However, in my book, there is no substitute to live theatre. That, you know, as much as I loved this project, and hopefully, you know, we've got a lot more to come, that kind of sitting there listening to the audience chattering at the beginning and knowing that this one performance is only going to happen for you, it's never going to be done before. And I think even just the act of filming something takes that away. So although I do think, you know, it's a lovely substitute and a way to get this play out, and hopefully new writing, maybe if people want new writing, etc., and all of these new things, but nothing compares to being sat in a theatre and watching a play live, in my opinion. What attracted you to this project?
Well, you, sir, the lovely Matthew Thomas Battersby. You know, I enjoy working with you, and I like the way your creative mind works, and I find you quite easy to work with. So I guess that was a huge part of it. Another part was obviously this project seemed like a really interesting way to pass our, at the time, relatively short isolation. And I think things like this are really important because you are offering people a creative outlet and you're offering enjoyment for people, a few hours for them to sit and watch something, and giving them the motivation to find that joy in things, which is really good.
I really like The Importance of Being Earnest for a start. Read it before. Oscar Wilde is a genius. And obviously I was on board with the script anyway, but just the idea of doing a performance where, you know, you record everything on your own and you engage like or you gauge with how people or other actors might interact with your character on stage. I thought that was really interesting, and it's a type of theatre performance that I've never actually done before. So that intrigued me the most, the challenge of it, to be honest, because the idea, like, going into it, I was like, this is going to be really, really difficult. But actually, I'm so glad that I came on board, because it's been a lovely experience, really. But I think that's what attracted me the most to it, the idea of how we're actually going to do it, as opposed to, you know, being on a stage and doing it as you would normally. Just the idea that this is totally different, and to experiment with how we deliver that to our online audience. So I think that was the thing that attracted me the most to this project.
So what attracted me to this project was the opportunity to act, because I mean, I don't know when my next chance will be to act again with other actors in the room. So obviously I jumped at this chance, and also, I mean, I've never done anything like this before, so I thought it was a good opportunity to just experiment with it, see what it's like, and yeah, I loved it.
I think what attracted me to this project was the fact that because we're all in isolation, like, we can't perform theatre as a group, like, in a physical rehearsal room or on stage. This sort of brings us closer together. Like, it still gives us a sense of, like, we're doing what we love. And despite the fact that we can't be together, the use of doing this and recording our lines and performing on video, it still makes us feel like we're connected, because in this modern day and age, technology really does bring us together. Like, it really does make us feel more connected, and I think that's relevant both in the theatre and in general society.
How did the finished product differ to your expectations? Oh, so as the well, it's my baby, really, this project. However, even I cannot admit to, from day one, going, this is going to be the best thing we've ever done. And I don't think it is the best thing we've ever done. I don't think it's going to be the best thing we've ever done, simply because of what it is. You know, it's what can we do? Well, we can't do anything else. I had many different ideas of how this was going to go down. Initially, I was like, no one's going to want to do it. So my initial thought when I first came up with this idea was, it's dead in the water before anything even happens. However, I had a wonderful cast come on board and get behind me and support me, which was really great. So I didn't know how well it was going to work, if it was going to be a complete train wreck. But I was very aware that I'd already publicised it before I'd started editing it, before we'd started filming anything. So even if it was a complete train wreck, I'd have to put it out there with my name on it anyway, which I think made me want to make it the best it could possibly be. Because if it was all secretive and behind closed doors from day one, and it all went to, then I would just let it be and not do anything with it. But the fact that I'd already put it out there and people were saying, oh, I'm really excited for this, made me want to make it incredible. There's a hell of a lot that isn't what I wanted. What I wanted was split screens and sound effects, and, you know, I didn't want me to be stood there reading in stage directions. But we're limited to what we can do, and I think it actually works really well. Obviously, with absolutely everything that I do, I will critique it and go, oh, if only I'd done this, if only we'd been able to do this, if only this had happened instead. But at the end of the day, I think we've actually made a really lovely piece of work that holds up on its own. I think it's really nice, even without all of the situation that we're in at the moment. I think it would still be a pretty solid, decent piece of work. Hopefully.
I think this exceeded my expectations with what it would be like. I mean, it's not that I had low expectations of it, but I didn't know it'd turn out as well as it did, if that makes sense. I thought it'd be a bit sort of jumpy and stuff and not really flow like actual witty dialogue can, but I think it actually worked out a lot better than I thought it would, which was, I thought, brilliant. I really, watching it back, it actually works really well.
No, it's definitely surpassed my expectations because I've never seen anything like this done before, so I didn't expect a whole lot, I'm not gonna lie. Also, I was aware of how difficult I found it, sort of filming my individual lines and things, and I know everyone else did from well in certain ways and had moments where they struggled and things. So I think from hearing that, I expected it to be a bit of a shambles, but it's not. It's kind of got this strange beauty to it, which is nice. I also think it's really cool that it's something that feels very now. And I'm not sure there would have been any place for it any other time other than now in lockdown.
So, I'm not a pessimist, naturally, but when Matt, our lovely director, first came to me with the idea, he was like, right, so we're doing The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, but we're doing it pre-recorded, so you're going to sit there and do all of your lines on your own and then leave gaps, and then the other people are going to be edited into the gaps. Initially I was like, I'll try it, but I didn't think it would work very well. Like, I thought it'd be too all over the place, or if people have misjudged how the other person might react, it might just look a bit awkward next to each other. But actually I think overall it was quite successful. So I'd say that differed my expectations, because I initially expected it to not work, but actually I think it's worked rather well, and yeah, I'm excited to hear people's comments and reviews, and just to see like what they took from it, because it was a good experience to do.
Do you think editing works well? How can it be improved?
Editing, so editing. As somebody who, I have a YouTube channel, I've edited videos for years now, so I think overall the editing was good. I think there are improvements that can be made, but they're just like minor nitpicky things that only someone who has done it would notice. For example, there's more like cut-in time. There could have been more layering between the editing. You also could have had split screen, so when characters are in a scene together, there could have been a split screen effect. I think that would have really been cool, but again, these are all things that you would need to have a good foundation and knowledge, and also the right software, which isn't available to everybody, to be able to edit in that style. But aside from that, yeah, the editing, it was fine. The introduction, it could have looked a little bit more professional, in the sense of it looked a little bit basic, I'm sorry to say, but it could have just been like a black heading with white writing, because it wasn't supposed to look professional anyway. So, but that's just, I think that last point's just a personal opinion.
Editing, oh, well, it would be really easy for me to sit here and lick my own arse and say, yes, Matt, you edited it beautifully and it was wonderful. However, there's so many things that I wish I could be able to do. I'm not everything that I do, I've kind of taught myself. I've never been taught how to edit videos, and I'm limited to technology. I've only got my iPad, which as much as obviously, there's lots of things you can do on iMovie, on an iPad, but so many things I wish I could do. I really wanted split screens. I really wanted to have it, make it look like people were listening to each other and in the same room as each other. But I'm limited to what I can do with the software that I've got, which is a shame. And I think also there's moments where I'm like, it doesn't look like you're in the same conversation, which is completely on me. Everything in the editing side is on me, just because I left half a second of silence in, where if I'd taken that half a second out, it would look like you were talking to each other, which is a shame. But as I said, I'm not overly adept at all of this, so working in the limitations of what I can do and with what I've got, I think it works as well as it can. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that obviously I could do is to take the visual away completely and keep it as a podcast or an audio play, which was an idea, but I think the point of this was that you can see the actors, you can see what they're doing, even if they have got the script in their hand or they're looking down at lines. The idea behind it was, this is an actor and this is what they're doing, rather than listen to this voice. But although I'm a huge fan of audio plays, huge fan, so a little shout out to Big Finish, who really got me into audio plays. And I think it was those kind of, Big Finish and audio plays, BBC 4, and so many different audio plays and shows that inspired me to do this and made me realise that actually this is possible, that we can use our voices to make it seem like we're together.
I think the editing works really well. The transitions are great. It doesn't cut off too quickly or too soon. There's plenty of time for each line to be said, and there's plenty of time before the next line, before the next cutaway, for the audience to react. It really is, given the circumstances, the next best thing to a play on stage, like in a real theatre. And I think the only thing that we could improve upon, like I think we could do for future projects, is maybe we could edit it together to be like a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting. That way, the audience could, if they're in the meeting with the characters, it makes the audience feel more included, and it makes anyone who watches this, who may be in isolation, feel as though they're not alone anymore, because this really is, it's a horrible time and a lot of people are bound to feel alone, but I think overall the editing and what we could do further, what we could do in the future with these projects, is we really do help to bring people together.
How do you think performances read to an audience? Do they feel disjointed?
It could feel disjointed. I know as an audience member watching it, I didn't feel too disjointed. Like I still got the sense of who each person was and what their character was, etc. Even though they're in different places all over the country, some are abroad. So I think, for the most part, I didn't feel disjointed. The potential of there being different backgrounds and different audio quality depending on where it was filmed might make the audience slightly disjointed. But, I think overall, the project was successful in its deliverance, considering the fact that we're all dotted about, and obviously all have access to like different walls, different rooms, different audio quality. Like some film on a camera, some film on their phone, some, I think even some are on their laptop. So I think, you know, there is always that element of that the audience might be disjointed, but I think overall, I know as an audience member, it didn't bother me in the slightest.
No, I think it's quite hard to tell this when you've been one of the people who've been filming it, because it felt disjointed to me acting it. So I kind of think I read that into it, whereas from like what my like family feedback and stuff, people who've seen it, they don't think it's as disjointed as I do, which I think is kind of strange. But I think that's just because I already viewed it with that mindset, because I knew one part of it so well. I made it. It was me. So it was kind of hard to not see it as disjointed and not judge my part, if that makes sense.
No, I don't think they do. I think that there is a tradition of things like Alan Bennett's Talking Heads, for example, that uh, that the kind of talking to camera, the revealing of one's thoughts, there is a tradition of that, and I think that it's really interesting. It's not something we do very much anymore, because we probably rightly prioritize the kind of the connection between two or more people in a live environment. But I wouldn't describe that it feels disjointed at all. I think it feels quite revolutionary, actually. If it, you know, the idea of seeing someone being able to stare into someone's eyes as they're saying the things that they absolutely have to say is quite thrilling. So it's a great experiment to do, and I mean, we'd all rather not be in the middle of this lockdown. Of course, we'd rather that coronavirus didn't exist, but art has to find a way, and under the circumstances that we are, I think it's a really great solution.
I think I've just sort of touched upon that. I did feel a little bit disconnected because of scripts being in hand or on phones. So there was a bit, and obviously anything via a screen is always going to be a little bit more disjointed. Obviously I'm used to doing this, so this probably feels a bit more, but for actors, most actors have never had to do this. They've never had to talk to a camera, so I totally understand why for them this is probably quite a weird thing for them to do. It took me years to get used to doing this, so I think they've done a wonderful job.
So I couldn't answer this question without saying a huge thank you and congratulations to the cast, because they've all shown so much love and support for this project and for me. And I think they've all done absolute incredible performances. I think in some ways it can feel a bit bleh and a bit disjointed. Obviously it's filmed and you can't connect to your audience quite so well through a screen as you can standing in front of them. But, you know, and certain things, the things that, I don't want to say irritate, but the things that make it seem a bit less cohesive when I watch it back is kind of varying qualities, which is, I expected that, you know, we don't all have the same phone or the same camera, so there's going to be different things and different noises coming from different people's devices. But yeah, I think a lot of the time it does feel like people are having conversations. One thing that really was quite noticeable to me, I don't know if it was noticeable to an audience watching it, is everything becomes, and I think because this, sitting here talking to a camera, is a very personal thing to do, and quite a lot of it becomes quite flirty, I found, and quite sexual, because this is so intimate, and it's kind of sharing those intimate moments. And there was moments between Lane and Algernon in Act 1. I was like, oh, is Algernon having an affair with Lane? Like, because of the way, the nature of filming something and sitting on your own and doing something, it's more personal, and as it came out in this quite a lot, quite flirty. If you could pick one other play to do in this fashion, what would it be?
All My Sons, because it's the best play ever written, and lol, we all know how much I love it. That's a serious answer, but I also feel like I should have another one that's not just like All My Sons. I don't know. What play? There's a play, actually the play that Emily and Siobhan did last year, Boys by Ella Hickson, and it's set in a student flat in Edinburgh in like the heat of the summer, the last few days before they move out, before they've graduated, and a huge part of like the location and the setting of that is about sort of being stuck and like boxed in and the tension and stuff that builds. So I think like that sort of thing would translate really well into this, because I think the nature of this setting and everything going on in the world has that same sort of tension and build up of that. So plays like that sort of set in one location, and really sort of claustrophobic almost. Things like that I think would work really well.
Another play I would like to do this with would probably be another play a bit like The Importance of Being Earnest, one that's quite a naturalistic thing. I don't think this would work as well with something that's not very naturalistic, because you are limited to a certain extent with what you can do. Though I guess not. It sort of depends on how you edit it and things. I think the editing in this was done really well. Obviously the cutting from person to person, etc. I think that was really interesting and done really well. But I think you'd have to, like, movement and things would be very hard to edit into this, I think. Maybe for some people it wouldn't be, but I just think it would be quite hard.
I think, I can't think of a specific play off the top of my head that I think would be really, really cool to experiment with. I think it'd be cool to experiment with different genres of plays. So obviously this is a comedy, but then what would it be like to do a Shakespeare play online, with Shakespeare in English? How would that fare with the pace and the rhythm of it? Would you still have the rhythm of the original text, or would it disjoint it, make it different? And then also maybe like a contemporary play, how would that fare? How would that differ? Would a contemporary work better than a classical, for example? Does a comedy work better than a dramatic play? I think while we've been given this time, it'd be really cool to experiment with those different ideas, because I think there is really something quite special about this type of theatre, especially in the fact that it can be shown to a lot more people than we might necessarily have gotten if they'd come to watch it in the flesh. It's reaching more people, which is always really exciting. But yeah, I think just experimenting with the different genres and seeing what we could come up with would be fantastic.
There's so many that I'd love to do and experiment with. I actually am doing another play in this fashion called The Boy Comes Home by A.A. Milne, which I've roped in some of our first years on acting and theatre making in to do that. That should be a really interesting piece. It's another comedy. So I'd love to do something a bit more contemporary. However, at the moment, I'm not sure how copyright law works and whether this counts as a performance. So at the moment, I'm restricting myself to plays in the public domain because they're free and I don't have money, or I don't know how to pay for things even if I could afford to. However, if we were looking at contemporary things, I think Lemons, 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 Lemons by Sam Steiner, which is kind of takes place in this dystopian world where you can only use 140 words a day. I think that would really lend itself to a form like this. And those kind of absurdist plays, Pinter or Stoppard, kind of lend themselves to this. What I'd really like to do is a thriller. I think it'd be really interesting to see how a thriller works like this, and if we can still create suspense and atmosphere in this strange setting. I would love, and I am, The Boy Comes Home is a lot shorter, love to do a lot shorter play, because this has taken up so much time, which I love. It is very much a labour of love. But I think I've worked out that I'd gone through, I think it's about 5.5, 6 hours of raw footage of people's lines, because, I've got everyone's, every time anyone a line or re-records it or says, oh, actually, I might do that, try that like this, I might try. So I've got an awful lot of that. So I think with a much shorter play, make my life so much easier. Shakespeare would be interesting to see if that rhythm and that pace still happens, or if you completely bin that and create a new form of Shakespeare. Would be interesting, but they're very long, so I don't think I'll be directing that anytime soon.
Ooh, if I could pick another play to do in this fashion, what would I do? Like I said, I'm someone who likes contemporary things, so I would pick something a little bit more contemporary. I don't really mind what it is, but I would try and do something along those lines. I'm trying to think. Nothing has immediately come to mind, but just anything, and even maybe, well, actually this came to mind, I just didn't want to say it, but Pitchfork Disney, maybe that one would be a good one to do. I think it's Philip Ridley Scott, I can't remember, I think that's the name, and that's sort of set in like an apocalyptic world where they're indoors. If you have some actors that actually live together, this might be a good one to do, but even not, I think maybe given the current circumstances, turn it into a positive where you pick plays where things only happen indoors, or maybe write something with what's going on. I don't know. Anything that you do is going to be cool, I think. So, yeah, I'm always going to pick more contemporary things. I'm sorry. It's just who I am.
Any other comments about the project?
Just that I had a great time doing it, and thank you to everybody who was part of it. Including, people at their homes who have watched it and commented and, left feedback of what they've enjoyed and, helping us share it and spread it around on social media. It's just a brilliant project to be involved with, and I just like to say thank you to everyone involved, because it really has been a delight.
One comment I'd like to say about this is that I thought it was a really good idea. I've never really thought about doing anything like this before, and I think it was really creative of Matt to come up with this, and it was a really good opportunity for us, and I would say that any opportunity like this in the future is one definitely to be jumped at, because self-tapes are so huge in the industry now and are probably only going to get more and more relevant, and this was sort of a good chance to have some sort of practice in that field that I've not really managed to get before, so that was very helpful, and it was a really great opportunity, and I want to thank Matt for asking me to be a part of this. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely do it again, and for any actor during this time I would absolutely recommend it.
I think if you're going to continue doing it in this fashion, I think it would be more beneficial to do it as a podcast. I think a podcast would work better simply because the actors don't know their lines. So I personally found it quite distracting when the actors were reading off their phones like this, because it's quite disengaging because I'm looking down. I know not everybody did that. Some people had it behind the camera. That was more engaging, but I think if it was just done as a podcast instead, the actors could could still read, but they would just have to animate their voices more, which they should be doing anyway. So I think that would be an interesting thing. And also, because it isn't visually great to look at, because, you know, people are looking down, they don't have a partner to look at anyway, I think it would have worked better in a podcast medium, and people could just listen to plays as they do things, as they do housework. That's probably something to think about.
But coming back, so the cold situation of the world at the moment, it forced me to stop and slow down for a bit, which I really appreciated and was really, really good for me, because I don't do it nearly enough. And now I feel like I've totally indulged in that for too long, and now I'm like, right, okay, let's go. And of course, I've still been, as part of all of that, I've still been like doing stuff and like working out and doing sort of hobby things that aren't so much career focused, which has been like a real joy and a bit of a pleasure. But I've really enjoyed doing the project. I think I'm really excited to see other ones you do, whether I'm involved in them or not. Yeah, I think it is a really interesting thing to think about. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the whole thing, because I think it is so circumstantial.
I think the only other things I've really got to say is thank yous. Thank you to our incredible cast. Chelsea, Grace, Siobhan, Miguel, Marianne, Emily, Anya, Max and Fran. You've all given me so much time and so much love, and, you know, spending time when you could be watching Netflix. So thank you so much to the wonderful cast. And also thank you to Zsara and Scott for agreeing to give their opinions in this video. A huge thank you to anyone who watched the play, who shared it, who left us feedback, who said something about it, who told Margaret next door that she should watch it. Anyone who has had any input in sharing this to the wider world, thank you so much. And I always say this, and I will always continue to champion this man. A huge thank you to Alex Lovelace, who is our course leader, but he's a lot more than that. He supports us, he encourages us, and I don't think I would have had so much positivity about this project and so much enthusiasm about this if it wasn't for Alex championing us. So yeah, I think it's just thank yous, and thank you if you sat through all of us waffling on about how we made it. So yes, just thank you, really, and stay tuned. That sounded ominous, didn't it? Didn't mean it to sound that bad. This interview's video featured contributions from Matt Battersby, Marianne Kelly, Emily Thompson, Chelsea Sheldon, Zsara Jaeger, Max Bayford and Scott Gray.